Now, I've been hearing a lot about stepping as far as truth and fabrication and some of the stories. And I've even heard people accredit the R. Kelly video for moving the dance culture, excuse me, across the nation, which is a fabrication in itself, because that's really not what happened. Because you got so many people that you need to name when you start talking about how this thing start moving, and you can go look some of these names up, and you rarely hear these people discuss this stuff when they're online, because at the time that these movements was taking place, a lot of them was still just local or doing a dance floor thing. A couple of them had lessons or classes, but it was only a few that was actually making their pilgrimages to other cities. So you had people like Lana Reed out in California. You had MSBU up in Milwaukee. You had Victor James in Indianapolis, in that area. You had the people out of Detroit. You had what's my man out in Oakland, Damon, who was dealing with Dave. You had Ciola Colston out in Phoenix. You had very few people. You had Atlanta, but you had Steve and the Patterson young lady out there that was doing the Atlanta thing. You had Sarah Teagle. Then you had the Heritage Ball come online. So a lot of this stuff was going on before the R. Kelly video, or before people start really going around giving lessons. You had very few. I think Dre Company had went out to Long Beach. You had a very few people that were actually doing anything outside of Chicago as far as instructions. And you didn't have the communication lines that you have now. So all of these things existed, and you rarely hear them in these interviews, and you rarely hear them in these stories that's supposed to be the truth. So when you pay in homage or a tribute to the content creators that really started, who had the ability or the skill set to put this stuff online on websites and stuff like that, you need to know your history. See, and this is why a lot of people avoid interviews and avoid some of these conversations, because they're so full of fabrications. They're so full of false narratives, and people want to argue false narratives. Let me see what's happening with this mic. It's a wireless mic. So a lot of people want to argue false narratives and things like that, because for some reason they just don't want to discuss the truth. So I guess it sounds heroic, something like that. But believe me, a lot of these people was not moving this dance when this dance was moving on a national circuit. It was very few. And we can name some of the ones that even in these different cities were trying to establish their foundation as far as embracing and grasping this dance. See, so you had a lot of collaborations that developed from those instructors traveling to these other cities. And a lot of these people that's saying they were players in that effort, they was not players in that effort. So like I said, you had Dave and Damon hooked up. You had LC, Sarah hooked up. You had a lot of people that started collaborating and establishing planting these seeds in these different cities. You also had Dave, which I think was the first one to go up to Milwaukee. So these are people that you need to talk to and get some of the stories as far as how instruction started to migrate outside of Chicago and establish some of these relationships as far as how Stepper started moving. And like I said, this was before R. Kelly. This was before Heritage Ball. This was before Steppaganza. This was before a whole lot of stuff. So what I see happening, or what has been established as the I guess the information pool, we have taken some of these major events and used that as the grounding or the foundation from which we build these narratives. and these stories, which is fabrications in themselves. For the simple fact that there was so much going on before some of these things that we accredit to these events. So even the Real Lodges was not what made a dancer credible. Most of these dancers already had their reputation, they had their history. So you have to learn where some of these terms came from, one of these categories came from, when they started calling things the out-of-towners, when they start calling them heavy hitters. I could tell you who came up with the term heavy hitter, but I don't need the headache. We was using another term, which was professionals, in a couple of videos that came out of Ceola when we was doing editing, chopping up some footage from some of the workshops that they had down there in Phoenix. You had Victor James did a couple of videos. So this was before he made his convert or transition over to the stepping platform. You had Artistic Motions. So a lot of these people, like I say, we were doing work on the national prior to the R. Kelly video. Now, did R. Kelly make it a popular thing and draw national attention? Yes, but this dance was moving on a national platform prior to R. Kelly, and I'm gonna stick to that narrative, regardless of how many people substantiate or validate the false narrative. See, so all of these things are things that all you gotta do is talk to the people. So if you really need the people who was putting some work in as far as establishing some of these workshops and things outside of Chicago, the professor who created Kwanzaa, that's who was dealing out in Long Beach. Like I say, Sarah Teagle was down there in Atlanta. That's who you need to talk to. Talk to Damon in Oakland. You had some people in Detroit prior to a lot of people that had started migrating up here from Detroit, because they was writing a couple of little articles here and there, and they had relationships with people. And all of this is before the white party and some of these people that are very popular and well known now. And these are the stories that you need to seek out, and these are the stories that you need to conduct some interviews as far as your content creation, because that is where the real story of Steppin' Media started as far as how this dance got out. Even Marky B came after many of us as far as moving this content across the nation. See, Marky B was doing Razzmatazz. That was a nightclub. He had a website on Razzmatazz before he converted over to filming and doing stepping stuff. And then his popularity came with Steppaganza, and when they start shooting the Real Lodges. Prior to the people who have the Real Lodges right now, Mary Green had the Real Lodges, and we wasn't capturing that event. We started capturing events when Angie Fain came out with Steppers Compete, and that's the gap year. If you go look at the history of the Real Lodges, they had a gap year where there was no contest. That is the year that Angie Fain came out with Steppers Compete, and I think she ran for 2-3 years. And that following year, after her first year, is when the people who have the contest now took over that contest. And that is where Marky B started filming the Real Lodges. I was filming Steppers Compete for Angie Fain for the years that she had it. Marky B was not filming. We was also filming MSBU, which is where we established the method of the people who first got in the midst of the contest and film, which was myself and Marky G, not Marky B. Went up to Milwaukee when they had their MSBU at Arliss, and you had G. Womack. Now, if you really want to know the history, for example, prior to Love Jones and Levert, G. Womack, we took some footage out of the MSBU contest and made a G. Womack music video. Now, it wasn't on the level of Levert and Love Jones, but it was a very powerful video, and I'm gonna find that video, and we're gonna put some clips up from that, because if you want to know the history, G. Womack out of Milwaukee played an intricate role in what I would call stepping music videos. And then you got Cardell, Carlos Cannon. And what we used to do is that if you had a performer, because they were not big stage or what you would call A-list performers, they were performing and they would come to different events and do their songs. And what we would do would capture the footage and make something out of the footage. Carmichael, he was doing, I think that was later in 2010, he was doing Embrace the Dance. I came up in there and filmed some of his footage, put a little clip together. And I think that was the same night that we captured James Harris, Taboo, Josiah. That's the first time I had ever encountered Josiah. And we put together that piece that you see going around that featured Man on Man, where people were actually circling around them like back in the day, showing the essence of that function. You had the birthday dance with Shanice Simmons, and you had that dance when all of those guys was freestyling and they were doing the Man on Man and they was tearing it up. So all of these things are significant to the history of how we filmed, how this stuff was established, how this stuff moved, how this stuff progressed, how this stuff came to what it came to now. And it's all about content creation. It's all about the history of stepping media. See, and that's what I'm always emphasize. I don't need to come on a show and speak what it is that I want to speak. I got my own platforms. I create my own platforms, come on here and tell you the history. It's up to you to go research that history or take somebody's word for it who's clout chasing, attention chasing. And if you notice, that is why they never mention the people that I'm mentioning, because those are the people that you need to be talking to, because these are the things that actually happen. See, they only know what you tell them. So you can only tell them about the White Party or Steppenganza or Heritage Ball. They only know those most popular events that established and organized themselves through evolution and time and change. They miss the small things that caused that to happen, to brought these things to fruition. Because prior to that, the biggest event you had with Steppin' was the Real Largest when Mary Green had it, then Steppers Compete, and then the rebirth of the Real Largest after they gap year and after Steppers Compete was established. R. Kelly came in when he was pretty much stuck in the boundaries of the city, and he did his video thing and finally gave Chicago Steppin' some attention, and that took it to national prominence. But that was not the beginning of the movement of stepping across the nation. This city has always had a reputation for the bop or bopping. So stepping moved on its own. And then there's phases of stepping that you have to understand as far as the history. So if you're gonna tell that history, then you have to tell that history right. So you can think in terms of the bop, bop in, the new bop, step in. And the reason you had a transition between the new bop and stepping, because you have to throw disco and all of that group dancing, bus stop, line dancing, and that period when stepping was real, almost died. So a lot of the people that picked up those who were the siblings, the young siblings, whether by a few years or not, of the people who were doing the new bop, as the older people called it, who were more or less the upbeat, energized James Brown people. These were their brothers and sisters. because most of them went off to college, the military. These are the people from the mid 70s. You still had people bopping, but it wasn't on the level or the scale that it had been for those high school years. And I would say the transition started around the 70s because that is when you had disco and all that stuff with the John Travolta and all that stuff come on the scene. And you had a lot of DJs who right now claiming to be historic stepping DJs. They were disco DJs. They went where the money was. They came back to stepping later in their career. And that's why earlier when we was doing sites like Steppers Express, we would always accredit Sam Chapman, who's always stuck loyal to stepping no matter what the changes were taking place around him and other DJs. He stayed true to stepping. We can name some very popular music radio personalities. They went wherever, whatever was popular. Even Herb Kent, rest his soul, he was doing the Green Man, the Jim Shoe Creeper. He was a radio personality. His focus was not stepping like those who stayed loyal to stepping. And there's so many others that we could name. Some of them were loyal to what they call dusties. Then you just had so many DJs that they did just like they do now. People knew if they hired them that they would pack their houses, and a lot of those places were doing disco, and you had that moment. So now when you had the rebirth of the dance, which a lot of people identify as stepping, you got a lot of different twists. That's why you didn't have a lot of walkers in that generation. The slow part, they took the intimacy out of it. They were not walkers. That don't mean they didn't walk or slow dance, but they didn't embrace walking or carry it over from new bopping or that era to stepping, because it had already lost some energy during the new bop phase because a lot of music wasn't slow. And a lot of walking, if you notice, if you look at the music, was really connected to the music. So a lot of the older music, which is more Motown and a lot of the popular artists that sang slower songs, you will see that walking was attached to a lot of that. The Delphonics, the stylistics, the music is more relative to walking than later on when you got that upbeat, energetic pace that a lot of the so-called new boppers was doing. Walking was not as prevalent as it had been in those late 60s and early 70s. When that music changed, which ties into the civil rights movement, which ties into that era in the late 60s and early 70s when music started changing. You start hearing extended versions of, you got the long versions of songs with albums, and that's when you got a lot of dancing because the music changed. They went from 45s to these big giant albums, and you had the long versions of songs. So it's so many variables that plays into the story that nobody wants to talk about it. Everybody want to pretend. We want to fabricate. We want to take a little bitty piece and try to build on that because maybe it's too much work for you, or maybe it's too hard for you to grab a camera and go sit down and talk to some of these people that probably are still around. I know I don't see Ciola Colston throwing any events anymore, but she be down there doing tennis with her grandsons and stuff. But that's a person that was throwing events in Phoenix at a time when stepping was probably unheard of in Phoenix. Like I say, you had Victor James. He's doing radio stuff now. He still does the stepping thing, and he's still a prominent figure in the dance community, but he was doing artistic motions. And these were all new variables coming into the Chicago scene. You had another group of people They were from the swing organization out there on the East Coast, and they tried to find a way into the stepping community, and they were collaborating with a lot of people. I forget this guy's name, but he was in the military, and they were from the Swing Association. You had the hand dancers that came into the stepping culture and established some collaborations, which was, I was up there at a school for Northrop Grumman and went up to a club called Eclipse and got a demonstration when BJ and Brad was alive, along with a lot of the other dancers that was there. I seen some steppers who remembers seeing we encountered each other that night. So in understanding the history of stepping, you got to understand the terminology, the music, the dress, the periods, how it ties into other historic events and times and eras on the timeline. See, you can't just erase the music, the changes in music, the changes in artists, the changes in bands. Remember, you had bands like, you had a period where you had 20 people in a band. You had what you call the Bootsy Collins, and all of them was doing their thing. Parliament, when nobody stepping in no Parliament, when nobody stepping to Bootsy Collins, when nobody stepping to none of that type of music or that era or that period. You had some songs that you could bop to and still get out on the floor, but that was not the main focus. Wasn't nobody, Earth, Wind and Fire music was waking people up, consciousness and kicking back, getting your focus and concentration on. The same with War and any other Tower of Power. We could name all of this type of music that was out, and people were no longer really bopping to those songs or that type of music. So once the music started changed, that's why a lot of classic stepping music now, you had to play the classics because the music had changed so much. If you wanted to dance, you had to play the classics in order for people to dance. Now people make music for stepping, which is why I always appreciated Marzette Griffin, Marky G, Cardell, Carlos Cannon. There's so many that you can name. They make music for stepping, and other artists make music. D. Robinson, they make music for stepping. So it reminds me, go read the history of disco. When disco started, excuse me, I'm gonna talk a little bit tonight. When disco started, it started with them borrowing music from R&B. That's what disco music was, fast-paced R&B, and they borrowed music. Then they start making actual disco music. Now, any music class, music professor, or person that's well-versed in music will validate what I'm saying. Disco borrowed music until they start making their own music. Stepping used classic music, and it has a very limited amount of music that was actually made for stepping. But you see it's starting to make its own music and develop its own music and styles of music. You got radio station, Club Stepping. You got other little online Shorty Smooth show. You got people that actually play music directed strictly for steppers. And that's a national and international platform now. And I can't imagine what it might be 10 years from now, 20 years from now when I'm not here. It'll be, you never know when something really catch, because when you're an advocate of that, like jazz or disco started off in New York in those back up in the clubs nobody knew nothing about. But once it took and became a trend, it just took over. So you never know when something is going to actually click. Until then, you're going to have these little pockets. You're going to have these, it may take, no one knows how long something takes, but it is a community and it is a culture and it has its own identity. its own music, its own styles and fashions, even style. Stepping and bopping was always about Gouster, Ivy League. Gouster, Ivy League. But now, if you look at stepping compared to bopping, it's an accumulation of all those styles. Whether it's Gouster or Ivy League, you can no longer look at a dancer and know where they live and what school they might go to. It's all blended. And that's pretty much the same with the dance. You can't really tell what era a person is from by the way they dance, because you might have somebody 22 that's doing the bop. You might have somebody 75 that's stepping. So it's not like it used to be where I could look at you and tell the way you was bopping that, hey, they probably from the 60s or early 70s, or a lot of the people you see now that's really dominant in the stepping culture, they were boppers, and they were really new boppers. That high energy, and that's basically the focus now has shifted from a lot of the different ways that people were teaching stepping with the counts and all that. Is pretty much resorted back to what it was in the mid 70s, which is more of a bop than a step. It's really not what you would consider stepping. It's bopping. It's the new bop. And that's just something that you used to be able to look at a person and say, yeah, they was probably teenagers in the 70s, or they probably was going to high school in the 70s, because that period between, I say, 68 up to around 75, you can pretty much pinpoint bopping, new bop. That's it. New bop. That was it. And even after a lot of people start going to college and all that stuff, a lot of people were still doing that. And those were you're going to find your loyalists. They never stopped. They've been bopping since they were teenagers. And they still bopping to this day. And they serious about it. And you'll see them when they get on the floor. You're not going to do what they do because they've been doing it all their life. You're not going to learn that in no class. You can go home and dance from sun up, sundown. You're not going to do what they're doing. They've been doing that for 50 years, 45 years straight. You're not going to learn that in no class. And we get confused because we think when we take a class, we can learn that like you learn the more contemporary styles. And the reason you can learn those contemporary styles is because they based on counts and positioning. You can fragment that and teach it, and then a person can go repeat it enough to do the combinations and the routines to emulate whoever taught them. That's why they look just like the person who taught them. When you look at a real bopper, which when you go out, you can look at a bopper. You're not going to learn that in no class. I don't care how many books you read, how many videos you watch, how many hours you put in. You can learn that style, but you're not going to do what they're doing because they've been doing it 40 or 50 years. Imagine that. So it's no longer a question of identifying a person according to a style of dance, style of dress, according to music. All of these things play a role in the history. I try to stick to the media part. That's why a lot of people say, come do an interview. I won't say a lot of people, but I've been invited to interviews. And I'd be like, hell no, I ain't doing no interview. And not because I think negative of your platform. I'm not doing an interview because people got a problem with the truth. And that goes for stepping media, that goes for stepping websites, that goes for the dance itself, the history, the terms, the terminology, the people who play significant roles in establishing contests. I mean, it's all confused. It's going to take probably some lawyers and a heck of a miracle to straighten this out. So have at it. But I'm in my late 60s, and I've already had that period where I invested time, money, equipment, all of that. And I did what I wanted to do, and it was fun. But I'm not going back. You ever heard that song? I won't go back to the way it used to be. Don't nobody want all that turmoil, conflict, controversy when you're trying to do something positive. But I'm going to comment because I'm about media, content creation, and I'm going to share what I do know with those, whether it's virtual cameras, how to set up a platform. I'm going to share that with you because that's what the Spirit lead me to do. But ain't no Spirit told me to come back out there and start arguing with people about, excuse me, about their story or their platform, or if somebody telling them the truth. Y'all straighten that out. Hey, more power to you. But I'm going to recommend, when it comes to content creation, Steppin Media, you got to talk to the people that was there when all of this started going on websites and online and being broadcast out through those platforms and mediums, the people who did the work. I wasn't a out-of-town traveler, but I had connections with a lot of the out-of-town people because I was doing stuff through email, videos, website. That's how I was communicating. I think I went to Sarah Teagle's Steppers Ball one year. She gave me a little recognition picture of Michael Jackson. And I got feedback for getting an award, you know. So I've never been one to travel around to Steppin events. And I did a video on it. It's about economics with me. It always was. Even when Larry Israel gave me the Achievement Award, one of my friends had to bring that to me. And it's not because I frown on people throwing events, but I consider it like this. I live in Chicago, where stepping is quite prevalent. So whenever I want to dance, I just pick a night and go dance. And then there's so many big events, classic groups. So if I wasn't paid or hired to travel, at that time I did go to Milwaukee, but they were my clients. If I wasn't hired to travel, then you wasn't gonna see me there. People invited me a lot of times, and some people even tried to hire me, but it was not financially feasible for me to travel to a city and film and come home with, once I paid for my room and all that out of my money, and I got $100, that was a waste of my time. I wasn't into the love of the game like that because I was seeing it from an economic perspective. If my love of the game is I could stay right here in Chicago and dance, and I wasn't dancing that much to be taking it that serious anyway. So when you hear me elaborate on the economics of stepping, I'm going to tell you how much financial sense it makes to me for me to travel somewhere just to dance. And a lot of times I'm seeing the same people that I see when I dance here. I went to, one year I went to the Heritage because I had never been there. So I went for that reason. But I saw the same people that I could see here. So I didn't have to spend a whole bunch of money to dance with the same people I could see in Chicago. These are my personal reasons for not traveling about. But I will say, hey, I might want to go to Texas Heat or to experience, because I've never been, just to see the atmosphere. And if that's a personal goal, then I would do it. But me traveling around this, man, I don't know what y'all pocket like. Spend your money how you want. I ain't got money like that. You see what I'm saying? I ain't rolling like that. So if you rolling like that, congratulations. But me, I'm gonna think about how much my room, my food, I gotta take my wife, I gotta buy my clothes. I'm taking all that into consideration. So if you giving me $500 and when I finish, I done spent $1,500, I just lost $1,000. You see what I'm saying? That's how my mind run. Now, like vacation, when you set aside some money because you want to go to Hawaii and blow your money and go to Hawaii and see the mountains or whatever, you know you're going to take that hit. So when you come back, you know you're going to take that hit. So if you're looking at it like that, cool. But I don't count nobody's money and I don't mess with nobody's hustle. You do your thing. As long as you keep your hustle away from me or try to convince me or feed me your false narrative, we cool. So I've always kept my distance. It didn't stop me from filming. And even now, I could film your set from my living room with a computer. All you need is a camera and a connection. I could film your event from a Zoom meet or from the Wirecast. And I know that. You can set a camera up and do interviews and everything. And they got some stuff now I'm gonna share with you in the next tutorial that is even better. It's better than NDI. It's better than any of this stuff that we're using because you getting the straight, your source is not being interrupted or challenged or threatened in any kind of way, straight through. Just like NDI can be when you're on certain networks, you're getting a clean feed and you can direct the show. I can direct your Stepper show from my living room. And I'm gonna start offering some of these packages and some of these things because you gotta understand how this stuff operates. This is media. This is stepping media. And just like the dance gotta grow and walking gotta grow, and dressing gotta grow and promoting gotta grow, content creation gotta grow. It's more than me just coming on here. I could do this all day. If you notice, it's a hobby, it's a passion. I come on here when I want. I said I was gonna title my show, Stepping When I Wanna. Because I can come on here and do a step show when I wanna. In fact, I think I had a clip down here. Let me see something. I'm gonna show you. It's easy. You see, if I wanna, I'm just telling you, if I wanna, man, when I first started videotaping, here's something that we used to do. I had a friend, bless his heart, he would put a camera on a tripod and you see people just walking by. That was our footage. Just, it wasn't you didn't have a mission. Like get so-and-so shaking hands, do an interview with so-and-so, get a picture of the cake, get a picture of the birthday tree. Somebody gonna perform at 12 o'clock. You gotta have a format and then we take it home and you edit. Or now with all the equipment that I'll be sharing with you, you got to learn what it means to shoot, to edit. So while your event going on with the right equipment, you can be directing or editing that video while it's taking place in real time. But you have to know how to set up, like I share with you, macros and playlists, and then you got to add a hardware. So it's a hardware part and a software part. These are the things that you want to study. But anyway, the camera's just there, people just walking by. At some point, we grew from that because, hey, you know what? Maybe I need to edit this. You know what? Hey, maybe I need to shoot that person right there. So that was all on the job training, and that's how you learn. You learn on the job, and then you go read books and you be curious about, how do I do this? How do I do that? And you go on and you learn. Eventually, you progress. And I'm where I am now. But this don't be no easy walk. You don't just walk into nothing. Even a dancer didn't just come out. In fact, I got footage on a lot of these so-called heavy hitters that when they first started out and they was tripping over 2 left feet, but see, practice and time, and they have mastered the dance. And now you couldn't, if you looked at their video, say 15 years ago, and now you wouldn't even believe it's the same dancer. That's the same with a content creator. If you look at one of my first videos compared to the work that I do now, it's amazing. It's a big difference. And the people who know me knows that. They know when I started, and a lot of them were very instrumental in allowing me to do work for them that allowed me to practice my craft or to learn what I needed to do to improve. And that's all I'm saying. I'm in my late 60s. I'm not here to compete for who's going to be the #1 content creator in the stepper community. Who's going to be the #1 editor? Who's going to be none of that? For the simple fact that if it's a matter of profession, they pay people as professionals or amateurs, you see, and that's how I used to get paid. People used to pay me as an amateur. Eventually they paid me as a professional. And that only came with confidence and knowledge. So I told you, I was a mechanic at the post office. The more I studied, the more I learned, the more people I met, the more those people moved me to heights that I needed to be at in order to become a professional. And I mean, there was people up in, aside from me going to Milwaukee to film stepping events, it was people in the postal system that embraced my skill set, and I was able to film media workshops where they would take the managers and teach them how to deal with media. I would do what they call women putting women on stamps, and they would have a big event at what they called the Italian Center up there, and they would feature and show the work that I did. But I didn't do that work by myself. I did that work with the people who were showing me things that I needed to improve my craft, how to do interviews, how to be on time for interviews, the questions to ask, not to be too lengthy, take too many shots, not to interject yourself in the interview. So I learned so much, and then there was stuff I learned from watching. But anyway, the point I'm making is that you move from amateur to professional, and you should be paid accordingly. So you don't come down and let somebody have you working like you learning. You are professional. So that's what you be, a professional, and you charge accordingly. Now, what you want to do is friendship, that's your business. Or what you want to do for free, that's your business. Or what you want to do for cheap, that's your business. But at some point, you didn't start out as a content creator just because you wanted to work for free. And if you did, good for you. I'm glad you're making your contributions to humanity. But everybody has dreams, and it's not always monetary reward like a lot of stuff I do now. I do because it's my way of giving back. And I tell some of the people that I've worked with, and then those that I've mentored, I tell them all the time, you got to get this back. You got to give it back. You can't take this with you. See, and I'm going to say this and then I'm going to be quiet because I've been talking a long time. Have you ever got any better because somebody screamed at you, cursed at you, belittled you, degraded you, attacked your self-esteem, attacked your confidence, ridiculed you, or devalued you? So when you meet people that think that's a method of leadership or that's something that's going to teach you personal growth, I know that's a feeling of offensiveness. Sometimes when a person even say, I'm mentoring you, you become a little moved. it's a way to mentor without saying I'm mentoring. And the reason for that is to show somebody what you know. And the only example I could give is that I used to carry people's bags so I could learn how to, they was carrying those big beta cameras then, so I could learn how to adjust the cameras, look through the lens, whatever chance I got. But anyway, I was going to a lot of big events and doing a lot of different stuff. But anyway, the guy wanted me to do something one day, and he couldn't go, so he sent me. Oh man, I jacked that footage up. But anyway, I wanted every opportunity. The people called him, they was pissed, man. It was a soccer tournament, like a banquet. Oh man, the footage scared me once I saw it, but he was cool with me. And he just explained to me what happened and told me what I needed to do to improve. He was a mentor, you understand? But he didn't say I'm your mentor, and he didn't run me in the ground. And I'm pretty sure he might have lost some clients because they probably told people his company jacked up that event. But he still let me come there and work, and I went to some stuff, and then eventually I got better, and he could trust me to do stuff. So the point I'm making is that you can mentor people without telling them that you mentor them. And it's part of leadership not to run people in the ground and devalue people. So when I talk about content creation and step in media, you want people to understand how it goes. So just like them days, I remember people paying me below my value until I understood what my value was. And I noticed how once I start telling them what my value was and I start asking for market rates, they were offended or got angry and didn't want to work with me. So when I start hiring people, I always pay them market what they worth. Cameraman, what does a cameraman make per hour? So if I took a guy on a wedding or something, that's what he got. He got the rate that people didn't used to want to give me. And that's how you mentor. And hopefully when he hires somebody to do a job, he'll pay them what they should be paid. And that's the way it should be. If I come to your event and I work for 5 hours, I want to be paid what media people do for 5 hours. Now, I know you don't have what Hollywood have, but don't ask me to come do a professional job and you're going to pay me peanuts. If I like you, which some people can witness to, I want you to give me what I asked you for. I might ask you for a couple of $100 to cover my gas, etc., and my time. And I'm gonna give you a nice job. But don't expect me to just work because we cool, because I'm a professional. And that's how those of you who's doing what you do, that's what you are. Or that's what you striving to be. And you are professional. And if you're a professional and people don't want to treat you like a professional, then don't you do the job. Because if they don't respect you as a professional, that already mean they gonna mistreat you, whether it's by your pay or in attitude. You establish your value as soon as you pick up that phone and start talking to them about doing the event. And then you won't have to do no videos where you pissed off or mad because somebody want to pay you peanuts for your hard work. I'm not gonna have that problem, because if you don't have what I'm asking you for, I'm not gonna be there, period. No love lost. But anyway, that's my talk for tonight. I really want to get all this out. It's like therapeutic, because I be listening to the Stepper shows, and I think people are doing amazing jobs. You know, I mention people all the time. I watch shows. I see Tony Dow and his daughter coming on with a nice little platform. I think it's the Stepper Network or International Network, or I forget the name of it. I'll put it up the next time I come on here. And it's interesting. I really like the chemistry they have, the content, the subject matter. I mean, you got so many. It's good to see. I mean, really, it's I can't tell you how when you start your thing or have your vision and you see things develop the way you may have visioned it, and it's in real time now, you feel good. Just like those people that's doing what they doing, in 10 years from now, and they see some young person. I guess dancing would probably explain it best, would be the best analogy. When an instructor see something that he might have started a class with 5 people, and now he got 200 people and 4 winners of the contest and another 10 couples that he could see out, and they really tearing up the floor. I'm pretty sure that makes him feel good. He didn't know that was going to be them. He just knew, hey, I want to teach dance, or hey, I want to do video, or, hey, I want to do interviews. And as you watch stepping, it's like you saw visions, but it's things that happen that you imagine, but now that you see it in real time, it's like, dang. It's like that feeling when you just like, man, this is great. This is everything I'm sure everybody who ever embraced this wanted to see. And that's just a damn good feeling.